A 38-year-old software engineer vanished during his morning run in Nevada. No witnesses, no screams, just gone. But Red Rock Canyon had eyes. Motion-activated cameras installed for mountain lion tracking. They captured everything. The runner passing by, a vehicle stalking him minutes later, and a face investigators recognized. The same face from a 2009 cold case. Watching runners. Choosing victims. For 14 years. This is the story of how a hidden camera network exposed a predator who had perfected the art of making people disappear in broad daylight. And it started with a father who just wanted to clear his mind before another busy workday. November 5th, 2019, Tuesday morning. The alarm in the Park household went off at 5:30, and James Park reached across to silence it before the sound woke his wife, Madison. She stirred anyway, opening one eye, and smiled at him in the darkness. "Early run?" she whispered. James nodded, kissing her forehead. "Red Rock, back by 8. Madison mumbled something about coffee being ready downstairs and rolled over, pulling the blanket higher. James moved quietly through the house, a skill he'd perfected over 9 years of marriage and 7 years of fatherhood. His daughters, Sophie and Emma, ages 9 and 7, were still asleep in their rooms, their doors slightly ajar the way they liked them. He paused at each doorway, listening to their soft breathing, feeling that familiar surge of gratitude that came with being a father. These were his girls, his entire world. In the kitchen, he poured the coffee Madison had preset the night before, drank it black and fast, and grabbed his running gear from the mudroom. His German shepherd, Maximus, was already awake, tail wagging frantically, knowing exactly what the running shoes meant. Maximus was 3 years old, 85 pounds of muscle and energy, a rescue dog they'd adopted when he was just a puppy. The dog had bonded with James instantly, becoming his constant companion on morning runs through the Nevada desert. James clipped the leash to Maximus's collar, grabbed a water bottle and his phone, and headed out to his silver Honda CR-V parked in the driveway. The house was in Henderson, a suburb just southeast of Las Vegas, where James and Madison had moved 4 years ago when his software company started taking off. James was a co-founder of a tech startup that built cybersecurity solutions for small businesses. The company had grown faster than he'd expected, and with growth came pressure, deadlines, stress. The morning runs were his escape, his meditation, the only time his mind went quiet. Red Rock Canyon was a 20-minute drive from home, and he loved the early morning silence there, the way the desert came alive with color as the sun rose, the sound of his feet hitting the packed dirt trails, the rhythm of his breathing syncing with Maximus's panting. But this morning, as he drove west on Charleston Boulevard toward the canyon, James had no idea he was being watched. Someone had been tracking his routine for weeks, learning his patterns, waiting for the perfect opportunity. James arrived at the Red Rock Canyon Visitor Center parking area at 6:43 a.m. The park didn't officially open until sunrise, but the gate was unlocked for early hikers and runners. There were only 2 other vehicles in the lot, both empty, their owners already on the trails. Perfect. James preferred the solitude. He parked, let Maximus out, and did a quick stretch routine, 5 minutes of lunges and leg swings to loosen up. The air was cool, temperature in the low 50s, the sky still dark but beginning to lighten along the eastern horizon. He checked his phone. No messages, no emails that couldn't wait. Madison knew his routine. She'd text him around 7:30 to remind him to pick up milk on the way home. He smiled at the thought, pocketed his phone, and started jogging toward the Calico Hills Trail, a moderate 6-mile loop that wound through red sandstone formations and desert scrub. Maximus bounded ahead, leash slack, nose to the ground, tail high. The dog loved this as much as James did. They settled into an easy pace, James's breathing steady, his mind finally quiet. He'd been stressed lately, a major client presentation next week, payroll concerns, investor meetings. Madison had noticed, told him he was bringing work tension home, snapping at the girls over small things. She was right. He needed this, needed to reset. What James didn't know was that at 6:47 a.m., the security camera mounted at the canyon entrance had captured his Honda entering the park. And 8 minutes later, at 6:55 a.m., it captured something else. A dark blue Ford F-150 pickup truck, driving slowly, deliberately, following the same route James had taken toward the trailhead. The motion-activated wildlife cameras had been installed throughout Red Rock Canyon 18 months earlier as part of a joint project between the Bureau of Land Management and the Nevada Department of Wildlife. The goal was to monitor mountain lion populations, track migration patterns, document rare species sightings. There were 12 cameras total, placed at strategic points along popular trails and remote access roads. Most people didn't even know they existed. The cameras were small, camouflaged, mounted high on rock faces or hidden in brush. They triggered automatically when they detected movement, recording 10-second video clips with timestamps, then going dormant again until the next motion event. At 6:55 a.m., Camera 7, positioned along the Calico Hills Trail access road, captured James Park running past with Maximus. He looked strong, focused, earbuds in, completely unaware of the lens watching him. The clip lasted 9 seconds, then he was gone, continuing up the trail into the hills. 7 minutes later, at 7:03 a.m., Camera 7 triggered again. This time it recorded a dark blue Ford F-150 driving slowly down the access road, far slower than normal traffic. The truck paused for a moment as if the driver was looking for something, then continued forward, disappearing around a bend in the road. But what the cameras captured next would become the key to unraveling a mystery that had haunted Nevada law enforcement for over a decade. James ran for 45 minutes, pushing himself harder than usual, trying to burn off the anxiety that had been building all week. Maximus stayed close, occasionally darting off to investigate interesting scents, but always circling back. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the red sandstone, and James felt his mood lifting. This was why he came here. This peace, this clarity. He checked his watch. 7:38. Time to head back. Madison would be getting the girls ready for school. He'd promised to make breakfast this morning, his specialty, scrambled eggs with cheese and turkey sausage. Sophie and Emma would be excited. He turned Maximus around and started jogging back toward the parking area, picking up his pace. At 7:41 a.m., Camera 7 captured James running back down the access road, heading toward the trailhead. He looked tired but satisfied, the way runners do after a good workout. Maximus trotted beside him, tongue out, tail wagging. The clip ended. 2 minutes later, at 7:43 a.m., Camera 7 triggered once more. The dark blue Ford F-150 was back, now parked on the shoulder of the access road, just out of sight from the main trail. The driver's side door was open, but no one was visible in the frame. The camera recorded its 10-second clip and went dormant. What happened in the next 34 minutes would change everything. At 8:17 a.m., Madison Park sent her husband a text message. "Don't forget milk. And Sophie needs poster board for school project. Love you." The message showed as delivered but was never read. At 8:41 a.m., Madison called James's phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She left a message, her tone light, teasing. "You better not have forgotten about breakfast duty. The girls are asking when you'll be home." She hung up, slightly annoyed but not concerned. James sometimes lost track of time on his runs, or his phone battery died. It happened. By 9:15, when James still hadn't come home or responded to her texts, Madison's annoyance turned to worry. She called again, straight to voicemail. She tried 3 more times, nothing. At 9:35, she loaded Sophie and Emma into her car and drove to Red Rock Canyon. The drive took 23 minutes, and with every mile, Madison's anxiety grew. She told herself she was overreacting. James was fine. Maybe he'd twisted an ankle, or Maximus had run off and James was searching for him. But deep down, she felt something was wrong. Terribly wrong. She pulled into the visitor center parking area and immediately spotted James's silver Honda CR-V, exactly where he always parked. The car was locked, undisturbed, but there was no sign of James or Maximus. Madison got out, leaving the girls in the car with strict instructions not to move, and walked toward the trailhead, calling her husband's name. No response. Just the sound of the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. She called his phone again. Voicemail. That's when she saw Maximus. The German Shepherd was limping toward the parking area from the direction of the Calico Hills Trail, moving slowly, favoring his right front paw. His fur was matted with dirt and something else. Blood. There was blood on his paws and along his side. The leash was still attached to his collar, dragging on the ground. But James was nowhere in sight. Madison ran to the dog, dropping to her knees. "Maximus, where's James? Where is he, boy?" The dog whined, pressing against her, and that's when Madison knew with absolute certainty that something terrible had happened. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The call came into the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department at 9:53 a.m. A woman reported her husband missing at Red Rock Canyon. He'd gone for a morning run, hadn't come home, wasn't answering his phone. His dog had returned injured and alone. The dispatcher flagged it as urgent and routed it to the Park Police Unit that handled Red Rock Canyon jurisdiction. Officer Dylan McCarthy responded first, arriving at 10:14 a.m. Madison met him in the parking lot, Emma and Sophie crying in the back seat of her car, Maximus lying on the ground beside her, panting heavily. Dylan took one look at the blood on the dog and radioed for backup. By 10:45, 5 officers were on scene, including Sergeant Kyle Porter, a 20-year veteran who'd worked dozens of missing person cases in the Nevada desert. Kyle interviewed Madison while other officers began searching the trails, calling out James's name, looking for any signs of disturbance. Madison explained everything. James's routine, his typical run time, when she'd last heard from him, the text messages, the unanswered calls. Kyle listened carefully, taking notes, his expression neutral, but his instincts screaming that this wasn't a simple case of a lost hiker. "Has your husband had any problems recently? Anyone bothering him? Any threats?" Kyle asked. Madison shook her head. "No, nothing like that. He's been stressed with work, but that's normal. He runs to clear his head. He does this 3 or 4 times a week. Same trail, same routine." Kyle made a note. Routine. Predictable. That detail would become important later. He asked if James had any medical conditions, any reason he might have collapsed. Madison said no. James was healthy, athletic, no heart problems, no medications. Kyle radioed for a search and rescue team and requested a helicopter. By noon, 20 officers and volunteers were combing Red Rock Canyon. The helicopter flew grid patterns overhead, thermal imaging scanning for heat signatures. Search dogs tracked James's scent from the parking area up the Calico Hills Trail, but the scent disappeared about 2 miles in, near a rocky outcrop where the trail split into multiple directions. The dogs circled, confused, unable to pick up the trail again. It was as if James had simply vanished. Sergeant Kyle Porter stood at the spot where the scent went cold, staring at the red sandstone formations around him, trying to understand what had happened. A man doesn't just disappear, not in broad daylight, not on a public trail. There had to be an explanation, but what they were about to discover would prove that sometimes the explanation is far more disturbing than anyone could imagine. By mid-afternoon, the search had expanded to cover a 5-mile radius from the last known point. Volunteers checked every crevice, every wash, every area where someone could have fallen or become trapped. Nothing. No signs of struggle, no dropped items, no blood except what had been on Maximus's paws, and a veterinarian who examined the dog confirmed the blood was the dog's own, from cuts on his paw pads, likely from running on rough terrain. The injuries weren't severe, but they suggested the dog had been moving fast, possibly in distress. Kyle Porter made the decision to bring in the major case unit from Las Vegas Metro. This was no longer just a missing hiker. This was something else. Detective Samantha Ward arrived at 4:30 p.m., a seasoned investigator with 16 years of experience in major crimes. She'd worked homicides, kidnappings, cold cases. She knew the statistics. When someone vanished without a trace, the first 48 hours were critical. After that, the odds of finding them alive dropped dramatically. She met with Kyle Porter at the command post they'd established in the visitor center parking lot. Kyle briefed her on everything they knew. James Park, 38 years old, software engineer, married with 2 kids. Last seen by his wife at 5:30 a.m. Entered the park at 6:47 a.m., according to entrance camera footage. Dog found injured at 9:53 a.m. No trace of James. Phone going straight to voicemail. No recent problems or threats. Samantha absorbed the information, her mind already working through possibilities. Accidental injury? Possible, but the dog would have stayed with him. Animal attack? Mountain lions had been known to attack lone hikers, but attacks were rare and usually left evidence. Abduction? That seemed unlikely in a public park, but she couldn't rule it out. She asked about the entrance camera. "Can we review all footage from this morning?" Kyle nodded. Already requested it. Should have it within the hour. What they saw on that footage would change the entire trajectory of the investigation. The Bureau of Land Management provided the security camera footage from the Red Rock Canyon entrance gate at 5:47 p.m. Samantha and Kyle reviewed it on a laptop in Kyle's patrol vehicle, Madison Park waiting anxiously nearby. The footage was time-stamped and clear. At 6:47 a.m., James Park's silver Honda CR-V entered the park. James was visible through the windshield, focused, relaxed. Maximus's head was visible in the passenger seat. The timestamp continued. 6:51 a.m., a sedan entered. 7:02 a.m., an SUV. 7:18 a.m., another sedan. Normal morning traffic. Then at 6:55 a.m., something caught Samantha's attention. A dark blue Ford F-150 pickup truck entered the park, moving slowly. The driver was male, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, face partially obscured. The truck didn't hurry. It seemed to be in no rush. It simply followed the same route James had taken toward the Calico Hills trailhead. "Back that up," Samantha said. Kyle rewound the footage. They watched the F-150 again. Something about it felt wrong. The timing, the pace. "Do we have footage from anywhere else in the park?" Samantha asked. Kyle shook his head. "Just the entrance. But there are wildlife cameras on some of the trails. The BLM uses them for animal tracking. They're motion activated." Samantha's pulse quickened. "Get me access to those cameras. All of them. Now!" By 7 p.m., the BLM had provided access to the entire wildlife camera network. There were 12 cameras total, scattered throughout the canyon. Samantha and Kyle began reviewing the footage, starting with cameras near the Calico Hills Trail. Camera 4 captured nothing relevant. Camera 5 showed a group of hikers from early morning. Camera 6 showed a coyote. Then they opened the files from Camera 7, positioned along the Calico Hills access road. At 6:55 a.m., James Park ran past, Maximus beside him, earbuds in, focused. The clip was 9 seconds long. Kyle fast-forwarded, 7:03 a.m. The dark blue Ford F-150 drove slowly down the access road, moving at a crawl. The truck had paused, then continued. 7:41 a.m. James ran back, heading toward the parking area. He looked tired but fine. 7:43 a.m. The F-150 was back, now parked on the shoulder. The driver's door was open, but no one was visible. Samantha leaned forward. "Keep going." "What else is there?" Kyle scrolled. 8:17 a.m. Nothing. 8:30 a.m. Nothing. Then, at 9:17 a.m., Camera 7 captured something that made Samantha's blood run cold. The dark blue Ford F-150 drove back down the access road, this time moving at normal speed, leaving the area. But this time, the camera angle caught a partial view of the driver. Male, baseball cap, weathered face, jaw clenched, hands gripping the steering wheel. And in the truck bed, something large was covered with a blue tarp, tied down with bungee cords. "What the hell is under that tarp?" Kyle said quietly. Samantha didn't answer. She was already running the license plate through the system. The plate came back registered to a 2016 Ford F-150, dark blue, owned by Garrett Lawson, age 53, address in Pahrump, Nevada, about 60 miles west of Las Vegas. Samantha ran Garrett's name through the criminal database. No major convictions, a few misdemeanors, traffic violations. But then she saw something that made her stomach drop. In 2009, Garrett Lawson had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of a runner named Brandon Lee, a 29-year-old man who'd vanished while jogging on a trail near Lake Mead. Brandon's body had never been found. The case had gone cold. Garrett had been interviewed because a witness reported seeing a blue pickup truck near the trail that morning, and Garrett owned a blue truck. But there had been no physical evidence linking him to Brandon's disappearance. No witnesses who could definitively place him at the scene. Garrett's alibi had been shaky but not disprovable. He'd been released, and the case had eventually been closed as a presumed accidental death, possibly a fall or drowning in the lake. Samantha looked at Kyle. He's done this before. But the question that would haunt the investigation wasn't whether Garrett Lawson was responsible. It was how many others had there been. Samantha immediately requested a warrant to search Garrett Lawson's property and bring him in for questioning. The district attorney, reviewing the evidence, the wildlife camera footage, the connection to the 2009 case, agreed there was probable cause. By 9 p.m., the warrant was signed. At 10:30 p.m., a tactical team from Las Vegas Metro, along with Samantha and Kyle, drove to Pahrump to execute the warrant. Pahrump was a small desert town, sparsely populated, known for its casinos and retirees. Garrett Lawson's address was a rundown property on the outskirts, a single-story house surrounded by desert scrub, a detached garage, and several old vehicles in various states of disrepair. When the team arrived, the house was dark. Garrett's blue F-150 was parked in the driveway. They approached with caution, announced their presence, and knocked on the door. No answer. They knocked again, louder. "Garrett Lawson, this is the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. We have a warrant. Open the door." Still no answer. They breached the door, entering with weapons drawn, clearing each room. The house was empty. Garrett wasn't there. But what they found in the garage would provide the evidence they needed. The garage was cluttered, filled with tools, auto parts, old furniture. But in the back corner, partially hidden under a tarp, was a large freezer. Samantha approached it slowly, her heart pounding. She lifted the lid. Inside were plastic bags filled with ice, and beneath the ice, carefully wrapped in layers of plastic sheeting, was clothing. Running clothes, shoes, a water bottle, and a phone. Samantha carefully removed the phone, placed it in an evidence bag, and powered it on. The screen lit up. The wallpaper was a photo of two young girls smiling at the camera. James Park's daughters. This was his phone. Kyle stood beside her, staring at the evidence. He took trophies, but they still didn't know where James was. And time was running out. The search of Garrett's property continued through the night. Every inch of the house, the garage, the yard was documented and processed. In addition to James's phone and clothing, investigators found a laptop computer, external hard drives, and a box of photographs. The photographs were disturbing. They showed runners on various trails throughout Nevada, men and women, alone, unaware they were being photographed. Some of the images were dated, handwritten notes on the back indicating locations and times. Camera 7's footage had captured Garrett following James, but these photographs suggested a pattern of surveillance that had been going on for years. Samantha ordered the laptop and hard drives seized for forensic analysis. She also issued a bolo, "Be on the lookout," for Garrett Lawson, describing him as a person of interest in a kidnapping investigation, possibly armed and dangerous. But where had Garrett gone? His truck was at the house. His personal vehicle, an older sedan registered in his name, was also there. How had he left? Samantha's team canvassed neighbors, but the nearest residence was a quarter-mile away. No one had seen anything unusual. At 3 a.m., a break came from an unexpected source. A forensic analyst working on James's phone discovered something crucial. The phone had been powered off at 8:11 a.m., but before that it had logged GPS data showing its location. The last ping came from a remote area of Red Rock Canyon, about 3 miles off the main trail near a section of desert wash that was rarely visited. Samantha immediately redirected search teams to that location. By 4 a.m., a dozen officers and search dogs were combing the area, using high-powered flashlights to navigate the rocky terrain in the darkness. At 4:37 a.m., one of the search dogs, a German shepherd named Ranger, alerted near a shallow ravine. The handler approached carefully and saw something that made him radio immediately for backup. There, partially covered by rocks and brush, was a body, male, Asian, wearing running clothes. Samantha arrived within minutes, her heart sinking as she approached the scene. Even in the dim light, she could see it was James Park. He was lying on his side, his face turned away, his body positioned as if he'd been dragged and dumped. A preliminary examination showed signs of trauma to the head, likely blunt force. The medical examiner would confirm cause of death, but it was clear this was a homicide. Samantha stood there in the cold desert night, staring at James's body, and felt the weight of failure. They'd been too late. James had been dead for hours, possibly since shortly after he'd disappeared. She thought of Madison and those two little girls waiting for news, hoping their father would come home. And now she'd have to tell them he never would. But at least she could give them justice. And that started with finding Garrett Lawson. The medical examiner arrived at dawn to process the scene. Dr. Logan Pierce had been Clark County's chief medical examiner for 19 years, and he'd seen more death than most people could imagine. But this case bothered him. James Park had been a healthy 38-year-old man, a father, a business owner. He'd gone for a morning run and ended up dead in the desert. Logan examined the body carefully, noting the injuries. Blunt force trauma to the back of the head, consistent with being struck by a heavy object, possibly a rock or a metal tool. Defensive wounds on the hands and forearms, indicating James had tried to fight back. Abrasions on the knees and elbows, suggesting he'd been dragged across rough terrain. The time of death was estimated between 8 and 9 a.m., which aligned with when James had disappeared from the trail. Logan also found something else. Trace evidence under James's fingernails. Skin cells. James had scratched his attacker. Logan carefully collected the samples, knowing they could provide DNA evidence that would be critical in court. He also photographed every injury, every detail, building the forensic record that would help convict whoever had done this. By mid-morning, the news had broken. James Park, a 38-year-old Henderson resident, had been found dead in Red Rock Canyon. The media descended on the scene, helicopters circling overhead, reporters setting up along the access road. Samantha held a brief press conference confirming that James's death was being investigated as a homicide and that they had identified a person of interest. She didn't release Garrett's name yet, not until they had him in custody, but she urged anyone with information to contact law enforcement immediately. Madison Park was informed of her husband's death at 11 a.m. Samantha delivered the news personally, sitting with Madison in her living room while Sophie and Emma were at school, unaware that their father was gone. Madison's reaction was what Samantha expected, but still gut-wrenching to witness. Denial, anger, collapse. Madison sobbed uncontrollably, asking over and over how this could have happened. "He was just running," she kept saying. "He was just running." Who would do this? Samantha promised her they would find the person responsible. She didn't mention Garrett's name yet, not until they had more answers. But privately, Samantha was certain. Garrett Lawson had killed James Park, and he'd done it before. The question was, where was Garrett now? The answer came 2 days later, in a way no one expected. On November 7th, a hiker in the Spring Mountains, about 40 miles northwest of Las Vegas, reported seeing a man fitting Garrett's description camped in a remote area near a seasonal creek. The hiker had thought it was odd because the area was off-trail and difficult to access. He'd taken a photo from a distance and sent it to the tip line. Samantha reviewed the photo and confirmed it was Garrett. A tactical team was assembled immediately. By late afternoon, they'd hiked into the area and found Garrett's campsite. He was sitting by a small fire, eating from a can, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. When officers announced themselves, Garrett stood slowly, hands raised, and surrendered without resistance. It was almost anticlimactic. They arrested him on suspicion of murder and transported him back to Las Vegas. During the ride, Garrett said nothing, staring out the window, his expression blank. At the detention center, he was processed, photographed, and placed in an interrogation room. Samantha let him sit there for an hour, letting the silence and the sterile room work on his nerves. Then she entered, sat across from him, and placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, the wildlife camera footage, James Park's phone, the clothing found in Garrett's freezer, Brandon Lee's missing person report from 2009. "You know why you're here," Samantha said. Garrett didn't respond. "We have footage of you following James Park. We have his phone and clothes in your garage. We have DNA evidence from under his fingernails. We found his body. It's over, Garrett." Garrett stared at the table. Finally, he spoke. "I want a lawyer." That was the end of the interrogation. But Samantha didn't need a confession. The evidence spoke for itself. The forensic analysis of Garrett's laptop and hard drives revealed even more disturbing details. He'd been cataloging runners for years, keeping detailed notes on their routines, their routes, their schedules. There were files on at least 30 different individuals, men and women, most of them solo runners who frequented remote trails. Some of the files included photographs taken over weeks or months, showing the same person at different times, different locations. It was clear Garrett had been selecting his targets carefully, studying them, waiting for the right moment. The DNA evidence from under James's fingernails matched Garrett's profile. The trace evidence from the clothing in his freezer also matched. And when detectives re-interviewed witnesses from the 2009 Brandon Lee case, several people remembered seeing a blue pickup truck near the Lake Mead Trail that morning. One witness was shown a photo lineup and positively identified Garrett as the driver. But the most chilling discovery came from the external hard drives. Buried in encrypted folders were videos. Garrett had been recording his attacks, not all of them, but enough. There was footage of Brandon Lee struggling, pleading for his life, before the camera cut off. There were other videos, other victims, some of whom hadn't been reported missing or whose cases had been classified as accidents. Samantha watched the videos with a sick feeling in her stomach, knowing that each one represented a life taken, a family destroyed. In total, investigators identified 7 potential victims connected to Garrett Lawson, spanning from 2006 to 2019. Some of the cases were reopened. Some remained cold due to lack of physical evidence. But James Park's case was solid. The evidence was overwhelming. Garrett would stand trial for his murder. The trial began in April 2020. Garrett pleaded not guilty, and his defense attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the videos were fabricated, that Garrett was being framed. But the jury didn't buy it. The wildlife camera footage was clear. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. Witnesses testified about Garrett's suspicious behavior over the years. And Madison Park took the stand, describing her husband, their family, the morning James kissed her goodbye and never came home. Her testimony was devastating. On May 18, 2020, after 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of kidnapping, guilty on all counts. Garrett Lawson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additional charges were filed in connection with Brandon Lee's death, and Garrett was convicted in that case as well. He received a second life sentence. In the months that followed, Samantha continued working with law enforcement agencies across Nevada to investigate the other potential victims. Some cases were solved, some remained mysteries. But one thing was certain: Garrett Lawson would never hurt anyone again. Madison Park struggled to move forward. She stayed in Henderson for a year, but the memories were too painful. Eventually, she moved with Sophie and Emma to California, closer to her family, starting over in a new place where no one knew their story. She kept James's memory alive for their daughters, showing them photos, telling them stories, making sure they knew how much their father had loved them. Red Rock Canyon remained a popular destination for hikers and runners, but the Calico Hills Trail was forever marked by tragedy. A memorial plaque was installed near the trailhead, dedicated to James Park and to all those who'd been taken too soon. The wildlife cameras stayed in place, still recording, still watching, and people who ran those trails now did so with a little more caution, a little more awareness, knowing that even in broad daylight, danger could be lurking. Years later, when asked about the case, Samantha Ward would say it was one of the most disturbing investigations of her career. Not because of the violence, she'd seen plenty of that, but because of the calculated nature of it. Garrett had been a predator in the truest sense, studying his prey, learning their habits, striking when they were most vulnerable. He'd operated for over a decade, hiding in plain sight, and only technology had finally caught him. Colin Spencer, a retired detective who'd worked the Brandon Lee case in 2009, reached out to Samantha after Garrett's conviction. He'd always suspected Garrett was involved but hadn't been able to prove it. "I should have pushed harder," Colin told her during a phone call. "Maybe I could have stopped him before James." Samantha understood the guilt. She felt it too. But she also knew that sometimes, even when you do everything right, evil finds a way. The important thing was that justice had been served. Garrett was in prison, and the families finally had answers. The case became a training example for law enforcement agencies across the country, highlighting the importance of preserving evidence, using technology effectively, and recognizing patterns in seemingly unrelated cases. The wildlife cameras at Red Rock Canyon were credited with solving the case, and similar camera networks were expanded throughout Nevada and other states. It was a small comfort, but it meant that perhaps future victims might be saved. For Madison and her daughters, there was no comfort. James was gone. The holidays came and went without him, birthdays, school events, all the moments he should have been there for. Madison tried to be strong, tried to fill the void, but she knew no one could replace James. Sophie and Emma grew up with a hole in their hearts, a father-shaped absence that would never fully heal. But they also grew up knowing their father had been loved, that his life had mattered, that his death had led to justice. And in a strange way, that knowledge gave them strength. James Park hadn't died in vain. His story had exposed a monster and prevented future tragedies. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. On the anniversary of James's death, Madison returned to Red Rock Canyon with Sophie and Emma. They stood at the memorial plaque, placed flowers, and shared memories of James. Emma, now a teenager, talked about how her dad used to make her laugh with terrible jokes. Sophie, quieter, more introspective, talked about how he'd taught her to be brave. And Madison, tears streaming down her face, talked about how James had been her best friend, her partner, the love of her life. They stood there as the desert wind blew around them, as the red sandstone cliffs glowed in the afternoon sun, as Maximus, now older and grayer but still loyal, sat quietly at their feet. The canyon was beautiful, peaceful. It was hard to believe something so terrible had happened here, but that was the truth about evil. It didn't announce itself with darkness and thunder. It hid in plain sight, wearing ordinary faces, waiting for the moment to strike. James Park had gone for a morning run on a beautiful November day. He'd kissed his wife goodbye, promised to make breakfast for his daughters, and driven to Red Rock Canyon like he'd done dozens of times before. He couldn't have known that someone had been watching him, learning his patterns, planning his murder. But the cameras had seen, the cameras had recorded everything, and because of that, justice had been served. This case reminds us that technology can be a powerful tool in the fight against crime. It reminds us to trust our instincts, to pay attention to patterns, to never give up on unsolved cases. And it reminds us that even when evil wins a battle, even when it takes someone we love, the truth will eventually come to light. It always does. Sometimes it just takes time, and cameras, and people like Samantha Ward who refuse to stop looking for answers. If this story affected you, remember James Park. Remember that he was a father, a husband, a friend. Remember that his death mattered, and remember to stay vigilant. Whether you're running, hiking, or just going about your day, be aware of your surroundings. Trust your gut. Report suspicious behavior. You never know what small detail might save a life or solve a case. The truth always leaves a trace, even in the desert, even in the darkness. And sometimes all it takes is a hidden camera to bring that truth into the light. If this story impacted you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue investigating and sharing these important true crime cases that deserve to be told. We cover cold cases, missing person investigations, and stories that need to be heard. Before you go, I want you to remember something important. Stay safe out there. Whether you're running, hiking, or just going about your daily routine, trust your instincts. Stay aware of your surroundings. Let someone know where you're going and when you'll be back. Don't hesitate to report suspicious behavior to authorities. You never know what small detail might prevent a tragedy or help solve a case. Thank you for watching, and remember, the truth always finds its way to the surface. Sometimes it just takes the right technology, the right investigator, and people like you who care enough to pay attention. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never stop seeking justice.